Privacy advocates do not want you to see this video because once you realize just how many South Carolina towns have quietly wired their main roads with AI-powered cameras that read every single license plate that passes, while a handful of officers just a county over got caught using that exact same system to stalk an ex, you start asking some very uncomfortable questions about what public safety actually means in your own town. This is 12 South Carolina communities that have gone all in on flock safety cameras. The automated license plate readers now watching intersections, highway exits, and neighborhood entrances across the state, backed by real armed robbery cases they've helped solve, real budget numbers these towns have committed, and real controversies that have already cost several officers their jobs. I pulled council minutes, lawsuit filings, and local news coverage from the last several months to put this list together. Because unlike a lot of the topics on this channel, this one is still actively unfolding in real time with new headlines breaking almost weekly as this video goes up. We've got a rural county that just passed the first ordinance in the state to defund these cameras entirely. A coastal city whose officer was fired for running an ex-partner's plate 166 times. A small town where someone was so angry about the cameras, they cut 2 of them down with tools in the middle of the night. And a county sheriff who says one of these cameras helped his department crack an armed robbery within hours. If this video helps you understand what's actually happening on the road you drive every single day, the least you can do is hit subscribe. I'm just saying, let's count it down. Number 12, Pageland. This Chesterfield County town of just over 2,500 people became the unlikely center of South Carolina's flock camera story this summer when someone cut down 2 of its camera poles in what police called intentional vandalism, apparently sometime over the 4th of July weekend. Pageland's police department had recently purchased 10 flock units, a serious investment for a town this size, framing them as an invaluable investigative tool for tracking stolen vehicles and people with active warrants. The wild card fact, the vandalism happened so quietly that police couldn't even pin down exactly when it occurred, only that the poles were discovered down over the holiday weekend, and the department is still asking the public for help identifying who did it. The honest caveat is that Pageland's experience captures the exact tension running through this entire list. A small department genuinely believes these cameras protect its community, while at least one resident felt strongly enough about it to take a tool to the polls themselves. For a town this size, that split isn't hypothetical, it's already happened on Main Street. Chesterfield County itself sits in the rural PD region, far from the dense camera networks going up around Charleston and Greenville, which makes Pageland's 10-unit purchase a genuinely bigger relative commitment than it might look on paper, a small-town budget stretching to match a technology conversation that started in much bigger cities. Pageland's police chief has publicly called the cameras an invaluable investigative tool for tracking stolen vehicles and active warrants, language nearly identical to what departments many times Pageland's size use to justify the same investment, showing just how uniform the pitch for this technology has become, regardless of a town's population. Number 11, Mauldin. This Greenville County city became a cautionary headline rather than a success story earlier this year when a Mauldin police officer, Ellie Hammond, was fired after investigators found she had used the department's flock cameras to track a former significant other's license plate 166 separate times between March and July. Hammond became the 5th Greenville County law enforcement employee fired for misusing the technology in recent months, a pattern serious enough that it triggered a region-wide reevaluation of flock policies across the Charleston and Upstate areas. The wildcard fact? Flock Safety's own response to the wave of misuse cases nationwide, including this one, was to announce new, more restrictive features specifically designed to make this kind of unauthorized personal search harder to pull off and easier to catch. The honest caveat here is about as direct as this list gets. Mauldin's cameras did exactly what critics warned they can do, and it took 166 searches before anyone caught it. Any town on this list embracing this technology is embracing the same risk Mauldin just lived through. What makes Mauldin's case sting even more is timing. The department had touted its flock program as a modern crime-fighting upgrade before the misuse came to light, and the same tool that was supposed to build public trust ended up becoming the exact reason that trust took a hit across the entire county, not just within Mauldin's own city limits. Number 10. Colleton County. If Mauldin's story sounds bad, Colleton County's is worse. An enhanced audit here uncovered more than 2,700 unauthorized flock searches tied to a single former Lieutenant Reuben Carter, conducted over roughly a year and touching at least 14 different people, including fellow deputies, friends, and former associates. Sheriff Gary Buddy Hill asked the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division to investigate possible criminal conduct and sharply restricted who can even run a search now, routing routine requests through the Communications Division instead of leaving the system open to individual deputies. The wildcard fact, this single case is now driving one of the strongest local responses to flock cameras anywhere in the state, with County Council giving first reading approval to a protection from mass surveillance ordinance that would ban county money, property, and personnel from supporting these systems altogether. The honest caveat is that 2,700 searches is not a rounding error. It's a sustained pattern that ran for a full year before anyone caught it, and it's the single largest documented misuse case on this entire list. Those searched reportedly included Carter's own fellow deputies and former associates, meaning even people inside the department itself had no idea they were being tracked, a detail that Sheriff Hill has cited directly as justification for routing all future searches through a centralized communications desk rather than trusting individual deputy discretion. Colleton County is largely rural Lowcountry, closer in character to Walterboro than to Charleston, which makes the scale of this particular misuse case, 2,700 searches in a county with a comparatively small sheriff's office, all the more striking when you consider how few people were actually running the system day to day. Number 9. Mount Pleasant. Across the harbor from Charleston, Mount Pleasant represents the more buttoned-up end of this list, the town other Charleston area departments point to when they're asked what responsible flock use is supposed to look like. Cameras are mounted at high traffic spots like Town Center, and the department runs monthly audits of who searched what and why, a level of internal oversight that stands out against the pattern of unmonitored misuse showing up elsewhere on this countdown. The wildcard fact, Mount Pleasant's approach has become something of a regional template, cited directly by other tri-county agencies as they reevaluate their own flock policies in the wake of Flock Safety's own August announcement of more restrictive company-wide features. The honest caveat is that even a monthly audit only catches misuse after the fact, not before it happens, and Mount Pleasant's own residents have raised the same privacy questions as everyone else in this story, regardless of how clean the department's internal paperwork looks. Mount Pleasant sits directly across the harbor from Charleston proper, and its comparatively affluent, fast-growing population has meant more resources for oversight than a town like Pageland could ever budget for, a resource gap that shows up again and again across this list between wealthier coastal towns and smaller rural ones. Other Charleston area agencies have specifically cited Mount Pleasant's audit process as they reconsider their own approach following Flock Safety's own company-wide policy changes, meaning this town's internal paperwork now shapes surveillance decisions well beyond its own town limits. Number 8. Bluffton. Since 2024, the town of Bluffton has installed roughly 50 flock cameras across its highly traveled corridors, and its police department is now taking an unusually public step, building a dedicated transparency site to show residents exactly how the cameras are used, following the same wave of regional and national scrutiny hitting every town on this list. Police here emphasize that the system functions strictly as an investigative tool, not live, real-time surveillance, but resident sentiment in Bluffton remains genuinely split between praise and real privacy concern. The wildcard fact? 50 cameras is a serious footprint for a town Bluffton's size, reflecting how fast the Lowcountry's booming growth has pushed local departments to scale up surveillance infrastructure alongside subdivisions and shopping centers. The honest caveat is that a transparency site is a response to pressure, not a solution to it, and whether it actually satisfies residents who oppose the cameras outright remains genuinely unsettled as of this video. Bluffton's rapid growth over the past decade, driven by retirees and families moving in from pricier Hilton Head Island just down the road, means the town's police department has had to scale up nearly every part of its operation at once, and the camera network is only the most visible example of that broader growing pain. 50 cameras installed since 2024 also means Bluffton's entire network is barely 2 years old, making it one of the newest large-scale deployments on this list and giving residents here a much shorter track record to judge than towns like Greenville, where cameras have been running since 2021. Number 7. York County and Rock Hill. This corner of the Upstate has built one of the densest flock networks in the state, with Rock Hill Police reporting 26 cameras and the York County Sheriff's Office running another 19, dozens total, stationed along major roads, including a documented camera in the Fort Mill area capturing traffic off Gold Hill Road. The system's reputation took a serious hit after a 2024 traffic stop in which a flock camera misread a resident's license plate, generating an alert that led deputies to confront a man at gunpoint over a mistaken stolen vehicle report, a case that produced a lawsuit still working through the courts. The wild card fact: Flock places its own nationwide error rate at 9 incorrect alerts per 1 million reads, and the company insists an alert is a lead requiring an officer's visual confirmation before any stop, not a conclusion on its own, though critics point directly to the York County case as proof that safeguard doesn't always hold under pressure. The honest caveat is that a change.org petition calling for the removal of York County's entire flock network has already gathered real signatures, driven specifically by residents who say a single wrongful gunpoint stop is one too many, regardless of the network's overall error rate. The petition goes further than most on this list too, calling not just for removing existing cameras, but for York County to publicly disclose every existing contract, cost, and data sharing agreement it has with flock safety before any new units go up, a transparency demand several other counties on this countdown haven't faced yet. Rock Hill and York County together sit right at the edge of the fast-growing Charlotte metro, and the same growth pressure driving new subdivisions across the state line has driven camera adoption here too, meaning the debate over these 45 combined cameras is really a debate about how a rapidly suburbanizing corner of the state wants to be policed going forward. Number 6. Oconee County. This rural upstate county just made history, becoming one of the first in South Carolina to move toward defunding flock cameras entirely rather than expanding them. County Council voted 4-1 in August to approve first reading of an ordinance that would prohibit county funding, county property, and county personnel from supporting flock or any comparable mass surveillance tool, with Council Chair Matthew Durham invoking the Constitution's limits on government power as the driving principle behind the vote. The wildcard fact: the ordinance doesn't stop at county government. It also threatens to cut off discretionary funding, including grants and accommodations tax dollars, to cities within the county that keep using the cameras, specifically naming Seneca, West Union, and Westminster as municipalities that would feel that financial pressure. The honest caveat is that this ordinance still needs additional readings before it's final, and the lone dissenting vote came from a council member who argued flatly that these cameras are simply a public safety tool being caught in political crossfire, a genuine disagreement that isn't close to settled even within Oconee's own council chamber. Council Chair Durham has framed the vote as a statement about home rule as much as about cameras specifically, telling other South Carolina municipalities and counties they don't have to wait on the General Assembly to act, they can take control of the issue themselves, a message clearly aimed well beyond Oconee's own county line. Number 5. Kershaw County. Not every story on this list is a controversy. Kershaw County Sheriff Lee Bone, who also serves as president of the South Carolina Sheriff's Association, has pointed directly to a flock camera as the tool that helped his department crack an armed robbery investigation at a local restaurant tracing the suspect's vehicle through the county's camera network to build the case. That kind of concrete, solved crime result is exactly the argument law enforcement statewide makes for keeping the technology, and Bone's position within the state's Sheriff's Association gives Kershaw County's experience real weight in the ongoing statewide debate. The wildcard fact: South Carolina law currently restricts local governments from using these cameras for traffic enforcement specifically, meaning the debate playing out here isn't about speed traps or red light tickets, it's narrowly about their use in criminal investigations, like the one Kershaw's cameras reportedly helped close. The honest caveat is that a single solved robbery, however real, doesn't answer the broader oversight questions raised by Mauldin, Colleton County, and York County elsewhere on this list. And Kershaw's own policies for auditing who accesses the system haven't drawn the same public scrutiny yet. Kershaw County sits in the Midlands, close enough to both Columbia and Camden that its experience gets less statewide media attention than the bigger Upstate and coastal departments, even though Sheriff Bone's statewide leadership role means his opinion on this issue carries real weight in conversations happening well outside his own county. The armed robbery case itself involved investigators pulling a suspect vehicle's movements from the county's camera network in a matter of hours rather than days, the kind of turnaround time that departments favoring the technology point to again and again as proof the investment is worth the controversy. Number 4, Horry County and the Grand Strand. Just days after Grand Strand law enforcement agencies launched a joint public information campaign explaining their use of license plate readers, Horry County leaders announced they're reviewing camera policies more closely amid growing public concern over transparency, data collection, and how long footage actually gets retained. Surfside Beach Police Chief Bill Mickle has defended the technology publicly, explaining that departments use the data to locate missing persons, identify dangerous offenders, investigate serious crimes, and give victims' families real answers, while acknowledging the same statewide restriction against using the cameras for routine traffic enforcement. The wild card fact: this review comes directly on the heels of the wave of Greenville County firings, meaning Horry County leaders are essentially watching what happened to 5 fired officers in the Upstate and asking whether the same failure could happen here before it does, rather than after. The honest caveat is that a policy review is not the same as a policy change, and residents pushing for real restrictions on the Grand Strand's camera network are still waiting to see whether this review produces anything more than a public relations exercise. Horry County's tourism economy adds its own wrinkle to the debate too, since millions of out-of-state visitors pass through the Grand Strand every year, meaning a huge share of the plates these cameras read belong to people who will never see a Horry County Council meeting, let alone weigh in on how their travel data gets stored or shared. Surfside Beach's own police department is small relative to the crowds it manages every summer, which is exactly the resource gap Chief Mickle points to when explaining why his department leans on camera networks that larger departments elsewhere in the state might handle with more boots on the ground instead. Number 3, Aiken County. Aiken County is in the middle of a genuine expansion, with local reporting indicating the county will soon operate around 26 flock cameras, part of a broader statewide pattern of law enforcement agencies steadily adding units even as the controversy around the technology intensifies elsewhere in the state. This expansion is happening at the same time South Carolina's own Department of Transportation has paused approving any new license plate cameras on state roads, a pause tied directly to ongoing litigation after the agency discovered more than 200 unpermitted flock cameras installed without proper authorization statewide. The wild card fact: Flock Safety itself has acknowledged the unpermitted camera problem, attributing it to unclear or misunderstood jurisdiction lines between state, county, and city roads rather than any deliberate attempt to skip the permitting process. The honest caveat is that Aiken County's growth is happening against that exact backdrop of statewide regulatory confusion, meaning residents here have real reason to ask whether every camera going up around them has actually cleared the permits it's supposed to. Aiken's flock expansion is also happening in a county that, unlike Oconee just a couple hours north, hasn't seen any organized local pushback yet, which either means residents here are simply more comfortable with the trade-off or that the same debate playing out elsewhere in the state just hasn't reached Aiken's council chambers in force yet. Number 2, Spartanburg County. Spartanburg has become one of the loudest voices on the accountability side of this debate, with the county sheriff's office publicly pushing for officer misuse of flock cameras to be treated as a criminal offense rather than just grounds for termination, a stricter standard than most South Carolina agencies have adopted so far. That position comes directly out of the same nationwide pattern of officers using department access to spy on people they know personally, the same failure that cost officers their jobs in Mauldin and Colleton County elsewhere on this list. The wildcard fact? Spartanburg's push for criminal accountability places it well ahead of the statewide legislative response, since South Carolina still has no dedicated state law specifically governing how license plate reader data can be accessed, shared, or audited, leaving individual counties like Spartanburg to set their own, often much tougher, internal standards. The honest caveat is that a sheriff's office pushing for tougher accountability doesn't change state law on its own. And until South Carolina's legislature actually passes something, Spartanburg's stricter internal standard remains a policy choice that could be reversed by the next administration, not a permanent legal protection. Spartanburg County sits right at the western edge of the Upstate's booming growth corridor, close enough to Greenville that many of the same regional pressures pushing camera adoption in one county are pushing accountability reform in the other, a split that captures the whole statewide debate in miniature. The sheriff's office argument is straightforward. If the penalty for spying on an ex-partner through a taxpayer-funded surveillance system is the same as simply losing a job, that penalty isn't steep enough to actually deter the next officer who's tempted to try it. Number 1, Greenville. No town on this list has embraced flock cameras more completely or paid a higher public price for it than Greenville. The city's police department runs at least 57 flock cameras, a count that community researchers call a floor rather than a ceiling. Since Greenville's own camera request process required new units to connect with private HOA and neighborhood cameras too, and the city runs a Safe Watch program actively asking residents to register their own personal surveillance cameras with police. The first cameras went up in January 2021, paid for with federal civil asset forfeiture funds, without a city ordinance or a council vote specifically authorizing camera-based surveillance policy, a gap that's persisted for roughly 5 years now. The wildcard fact? At least one Greenville Area Homeowners Association already operates its own private license plate reader, feeding into this same broader network, meaning the true scale of who can see your daily driving patterns around Greenville extends well past what the city's own official camera count suggests. The honest caveat is the biggest one on this entire list. Greenville is also the county where multiple officers, including the Mauldin case at number 11, were fired this year for misusing this exact technology, making it simultaneously the most extensive flock deployment in the state and the epicenter of the worst documented abuse cases connected to it. Greenville's population and job growth over the past decade have outpaced almost every other city in the state, and its police department has scaled its surveillance footprint to match that growth at roughly the same speed, installing cameras first and building formal oversight policy only after 5 years and 5 fired officers forced the conversation into the open. Whatever comes next in South Carolina's fight over these cameras, it's very likely going to start here, in the same city where the technology first arrived on state roads back in 2021, and where the consequences of adopting it faster than the state could regulate it are now on fullest display. If you're learning stuff about South Carolina that you never expected, hit that subscribe button. I cover the towns, the technology, and the real estate stories shaping this state every single week. And trust me, this list is only getting more relevant from here, not less. Before we wrap up, do me a favor. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about what's actually happening in your own town. So drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I put out content like this every single week covering the best, the worst, and the most surveilled places to live across South Carolina. None of the 12 places on this list are hiding what they're doing, not exactly, but almost none of them are explaining it clearly either, and that gap Between installation and explanation is where every single controversy on this countdown actually started. A camera pole went up in Pageland with a press release calling it invaluable, and a resident cut it down in the middle of the night without a word of public debate in between. An officer in Mauldin ran 166 searches before anyone noticed, and a sheriff in Colleton County found 2,700 more once he finally looked. Whatever you think about license plate cameras watching the roads you drive every day, the honest version of this story is that South Carolina adopted this technology faster than it built the rules to govern it, and 12 towns in, that gap still hasn't closed. There is currently no single statewide law in South Carolina governing how long this data can be kept, who can access it, or what happens when it's misused, which means every one of the 12 places on this list is essentially writing its own rules as it goes, some far more carefully than others. If this video helped you understand what's actually happening on your own roads, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me whether your town made this list or whether it's got cameras of its own nobody's talking about yet. I'll see you in the next one.